You're right, everyone. So it's a video on Palworld, because it's getting quite popular recently. Specifically on how it's somehow unexpectedly good and bad at the same time. So subscribe if you're enjoying, let's get started. Now, Palworld's quite interesting to me, because I've never had any interest in Pokemon. And obviously it's very similar to that. But I thought I'd give it a try. And I've been flitting between thinking the game's good and thinking the game's bad from the start. And honestly, I'm still not fully sure. So I'll just say what I think's good and what I think's bad and let you decide. First I wanted to talk about the bugs. Despite being in early access, the game actually runs flawlessly with no bugs to speak of. Of course, I'm joking. It's a buggy mess most of the time. But like I say, hopefully that can just be chalked up to being early access. Here's some examples. Now, most of these bugs aren't really an issue a lot of the time, but it's still not nice to see them. This many of them, at least. Next I'll talk about the graphics, and to be honest, I really don't like them. More specifically, I don't like the contrast of them. Now, all the Pals have that distinct Pokemon look, but a lot of the terrain is more realistic, and they do not match at all. Now, it's not really a big issue, but sometimes you just look out and you see these bright, cartoonish characters with this realistic looking grass and forest, and it doesn't fit. It's really not great. Now, I do like the designs of the Pals. I just wish they'd have stuck to at least a more similar thing for the terrain. Now, the movement is clunky, to say the least. Not all the movement is bad. I like the ability to climb pretty much everything. I think that makes getting around a lot more enjoyable. But the more basic movement, just like walking around, is really clunky, and it can be quite off-putting at times. There's also, at least in my experience, been a lot of rubber banding, which is, again, quite unpleasant, but it might be different for you. Similar thing's true with the combat, at least the melee combat, because you've got a roll which is quite useful and quite nice to use, but the actual attacking feels quite clunky in itself. I do quite like the range combat though, that's fine. As for the Pals themselves, they're essentially Pokemon, which I'll talk more about in a minute, but I think they've done quite a good job with them. There's a surprisingly complex system of the strengths and weaknesses of each one and all the moves and everything. And of course they can use guns, which makes it even better. I do also like the idea they've had where you can make them work for you. I think that's really good and saves you a lot of time. So you're not just farming for materials for most of your playthrough, but you can get your pals to do it for you. The open world's really quite good too. There's quite a lot in it, and it's massive, but it keeps you wanting to look around to find the diary entries or the little statues that make it easier to capture the Pals, or the Pals themselves if you can find a new one. Despite not being completely jam-packed with stuff like some other games, the amount of Pals, like I say, makes it worthwhile because you just want to find some new ones. Oh, and speaking of the diary entries, yeah, the game has lore, which, personally, I can't be arsed reading through all of them, but if you can, then I'm sure there's a lot for you. Now, I want to say lore is awfully necessary for a game like this, but I'm glad they made the attempt, even though, personally, I don't really care. Now, onto the AI. What bloody AI? There isn't any. At least half the time there isn't. Here's an example. This happens all the time in Palworld, be it your enemies or pals getting stuck on the geometry and not moving, or not attacking. It's pretty dreadful, honestly. The main thing that's got Palworld in a bit of bother though is how similar it is to some other games, and how it's essentially just copied some features of them. Take the inventory for example, and the menu where you unlock new things to craft. That's just been stolen from Ark. Take the open world for example, like the piece of music when you get into a new area, or the text that appears, or the glider, or the ability to climb anything. That's been taken from Legend of Zelda, the new ones. When speaking of stealing off Legend of Zelda, the last game that the developers made is called Craftopia, and is essentially just a carbon copy of Legend of Zelda, so they're not exactly new to just taking ideas from other games and copying them. And of course, what they've copied the most of is Pokemon. Honestly, it is quite surprising they haven't been sued, but I think it was done on purpose. I think they know exactly how much they can rip off another game like Pokemon without getting sued. It's almost quite impressive, actually. This could be a good thing, though, for some Pokemon fans. Like I say, I've never really been interested in Pokemon, but apparently the latest Pokemon games haven't been very good, so I suppose that has that going for it. No matter where you stand on Palworld, whether you like it or not, it isn't really ever good to see such blatant ripping off of other games' features without even slightly trying to change them. So overall, I don't really know where I stand on Palworld. On one hand, it definitely has a lot of negatives, but some of them can be chalked up to being in early access. On the other hand, it does have a lot of positives and good features. Though, then again, a lot of those good features have been straight up stolen from other games with nothing about them changed. At the end of the day though, it can be quite fun, and really what more can you ask for a game? I can't help but compare it, and this could be quite a strange comparison, but I can't help but compare it to Prototype 2. Remember that game? No? Well, I don't blame you. Now, Prototype 2 is almost objectively a bad game for a multitude of reasons, but it can be very fun at times, which someone could argue makes it a good game, because why else are you playing a game if not for fun? Now, in no way am I saying Palworld's as bad as Prototype 2. It is far, far better. But I think they can be compared in the way that, despite the fact that they have a lot of flaws and a lot of negatives, in my opinion more than positives, they can be both very fun at times, which, like I say, people can argue makes them good games. Now, should you play it? Well, that depends on you. If you're a fan of this type of game, and the game it stole from, especially Pokemon, then you are more likely to enjoy it. That's not to say you won't enjoy it if you aren't a fan of the game it's similar to. Like me personally, I don't like Ark, I've never been interested in Pokemon, and I've never played a Legend of Zelda game. Yet, I have still enjoyed myself playing Palworld, and I will likely keep playing it. So, should you buy it? I'd be hesitant. In the state it's in with all the bugs now, maybe wait a bit. Now in my case, I play on Xbox, so I got to play it for free from the Game Pass. And if you can also play it for free, then I'd highly recommend you do. Even if it's just to see if you like it or not. Without Game Pass on Xbox, it's going for 25 quid. And I wouldn't even dream of paying that for it, personally, as much as I enjoyed myself. Honestly, I'd hesitate spending much more than a £5 on it. £10 maximum. Of course, this depends on your interest in Pokemon and whatnot, but if you are thinking of buying it outright, I'd highly recommend looking at more reviews and gameplay and thinking long and hard about it, because I don't see it as worth the money, honestly. But it's up to you. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.